So we're here with Eric Bissell again. It's always a pleasure to have Eric. We had a rousing Shabbat discussion yesterday on a vital topic, especially during these times when everything's going to shit. Yes, I'm going to say shit. The news.
That's Sheen Talk, right?
Sheen Talk, yes.
We won't go with the.
Anyway, we get distracted by all these things, the Clinton scandal, the shootings, just the craziness that's going on these days, and it can take our focus off what's really important. And kind of a common saying among us around here is, when do we get to do the good stuff? Eric, when do we get to do the good stuff?
Right now.
All right. How?
Well, that's the caveat. It's all hinged on what we do. I recently wrote up this article that I have emailed to some people, and anybody's welcome to have it. In fact, if you go to Bill Sanford's site, he has it on there and people can download it. It's called The Shields Project. On one of the first pages, I quote this verse from Isaiah 47, verse 7. It says, well, get a little bit of reference. YHUH here is speaking to Babylon. It says, well, let's back up. Chapter 47. He's talking to the daughter of Babylon, saying she's going to be getting what for handed to her. Verse 4 says, our Redeemer, whose name is Yahweh Zavot, the Kadosh One of Israel. It just plugs that in as like this herald of our exclaiming, he's our champion. And then it goes on to say, sit silently, then go into the darkness, O daughter of the Chaldeans, for they will no longer call you the mistress of the kingdoms. Now I've heard, actually on the internet, there's a certain video, a couple hours long, where a certain fellow has come to the revelation of understanding, and he put this whole video out that he says America is the mystery Babylon. Now, whether or not that's so, he validates it by the whole video.
It's definitely a part of it, the confusion and the mixture.
Might be some type of the New World Order, the amalgamation of all the various kingdoms that were in the vision of Nebuchadnezzar in Daniel chapter 2, the head of gold, arms of silver, legs of bronze, legs of iron. It says here, Yahweh speaking to this daughter of the Chaldeans, so it could be this mystery Babylon. I became angry at my people. I degraded my heritage and delivered them into your hand. Now this is YHUH himself saying that he got ticked off at his people Israel.
Doing the smackdown.
And he delivered them into the hands of their enemies, who is this Babylon character. It says, you showed them no compassion. You made your yoke very heavy upon the aged. You said to yourself, forever I will be a mistress. So you did not take these upon your heart. You did not remember end. What does that mean? Here in this particular talk they said, you did not remember my heritage's end. Basically, if you just read in English, you have no idea what this is talking about. But what it says is, lo zakarta achrita. Or as somebody else said, if you don't know what I'm saying in Hebrew, you have no idea what this means. To make a long story short, Yahweh has predetermined that there is a future for his people. That's the word achar. What's coming next, what's been delayed and deferred and postponed, but is certainly going to happen because he decreed it so. And he's saying the one that he allowed to sit on this throne of rulership, oppressing his people, because his people betrayed the covenant, acted treacherously with their commitment to him, and started doing all forms of wickedness, he said, okay, I will put you into, Yahweh said, I will put his own people into submission of this, what you might call a goyim, other nation authority of slavery and oppression, but only until they return to the covenant. It's not that they get to sit on the throne forever. And there's many, numerous, dozens, if not hundreds of verses and whole passages where Yahweh says, I will restore my people when and on the condition that they return to the terms of the covenant which their forefathers had betrayed. So the question is, when do we get to do the good stuff? There's a couple aspects to this discussion. One is, well, what's good stuff? And the other thing is, when does that happen? Yahweh says right here that he had designed and set up, like staging dominoes ready to fall, this whole situation where his people would get their inheritance back. But it's not going to happen until we do something. And in the interim, in the meanwhile, this mistress of Babylon, daughter of the Chaldeans, and remember the word Chaldean refers to not only the area of Chaldea, but the Chaldeans were known as the Magi, where we get the word magician, sorcerers, astrologers, people who used magic and necromancy and sorcery and wizardry to manipulate forces. Not that they're the good guys, but Yahweh said, my people have done so perversely, I'm going to turn them over to the hands of their enemies. If we back up a little bit into chapter 46 of Isaiah, remember this and strengthen yourselves. Take it to heart, O evildoers. He's still talking to his people. Recall the early events of ancient times. I am Elohim, and there is no other. I am Elohim, and there is none like me. From the beginning I foretell the outcome, from the earlier times what has not yet been. I say, and my plan will stand, and I will carry out my every desire. Now, in my estimation, for him to make a plan, that's really what the word aleph represents and means, and to accomplish that plan, to carry it out, is what the word tav means. So this is an encryption of this word aleph-tav. He says in another place, as I have planned, so shall it be. As I have purposed, so it shall arise. When a word goes out of his mouth, it will not return void. It will accomplish whatever he set forth to do. So here is one of these places where he's encrypted aleph-tav. I have summoned the vulture. That word there, ayin yod tet, means to swoop in with screams. Not necessarily a vulture, more like this hawk, perhaps, or an osprey. From the east, from a distant land, the man of my counsel, I spoke, I will carry it out. I formed, I will also accomplish. So here he's going, aleph-tav, aleph-tav, aleph-tav. The word YHUH, Yod He Vav He, literally means he will cause it to be, and he will destroy it. Listen to me, O fierce-hearted ones, who are far from righteousness. I have brought my righteousness close. It will not be far, or not be pushed away. And my salvation it will not delay. I will establish my salvation in Zion, my splendor for Israel. My point is this. We have been told from a certain model of eschatology that the bad guys get to win until the end. They get to sit on the throne of the earth until one day the sky rips open, Jesus appears, and he establishes his kingdom forever. But Yahweh doesn't say that. I keep finding, again, hundreds of places where Yahweh says the bad guys only get to sit on the throne until the people of Israel return to the terms of the covenant. When do we get to do the
Be the head instead of the tail.
There's so many analogies. If we back up a little bit more as to why he would do such a thing, the beginning of chapter 46. Listen to me, O house of Yaakov. What? Is he saying something? And I've heard people say that this has all been nailed to the cross. Don't pay any attention to the Old Testament. And all the remnant of the house of Israel who are born by me from birth, who are carried from the womb until your old age, I am unchanged, and until your white-haired years I will carry you, I made you, I will bury you, meaning carry, B-E-A-R, I will carry you and I will rescue you. To whom can you liken me or consider equal or compare me that we should seem alike? And then he goes on to talk about those people who make idols which are nothings. He's basically saying in other places, Israel is my heritage. So I've said before that if it wasn't for Israel, Yahweh would basically have nothing. In that he says, Israel is my firstborn. Israel is my heritage. He equates Israel to a daughter and to a wife. A heritage is something you inherit, which is to say, it's your future having been made as a provision for you. And Yahweh says, I've provided for myself this people. And as long as his people don't do what he says, it's kind of like Israel was given the land, and as if Israel doesn't do what he says, Israel gets kicked out of the land, and the land sits there doing nothing. As long as his people don't do what he says, he doesn't have an inheritance. He doesn't even have a future. He has a vested interest in us returning to do what he says. There's this place in Jeremiah 21:31. Verse 17. I have heard Ephraim moaning. Now this is Ephraim, who represents the northern 10 tribes, not the southern 2 tribes known as the Jews or Yehudah. You have chastised me, and I have become chastened like an untrained calf. Bring me back to you, and I shall return. So here, Ephraim is saying, you are Yahweh my Elohim. This is a picture of the prodigal son story. For after my returning, that word returning is also mean being rebellious or turning away. I regretted, and after my being made aware, I slapped my thigh in anguish. I was ashamed and humiliated, for I bore the disgrace of my youth. And then Yahweh speaks, is Ephraim my favorite son, or such a delightful child that whenever I speak of him, I remember him more and more? Therefore, this is Yahweh speaking, my inner self yearns for him. I will surely take pity on him. Has this happened yet? We don't have any world history record of the 10 tribes that have been banished across the face of the earth actually coming back in identity of Reuben, Gad, Zebulun, Simeon. All we have is the tribe of Yehudah.
Previously, he said that Ephraim is a cake unturned.
A cake unturned. This is the occasion of Ephraim turning back. Therefore, my inner self yearns for him. Yahweh yearns for this occasion of his people who don't claim to be Jews, but they come back to him. And he tells us before, what does it mean to turn back to him? It says it in Deuteronomy 28 and Leviticus 26. Both those passages start off saying, this is what the blessing looks like, and it looks like basically a pleasant life. Nature cooperates, plants grow, children, generations reproduce, the enemies are afraid of us. We basically live a rather la-di-da life. Not any necessarily spectacular firework displays, but things rather pleasant. And then he says, if you don't do what I say, hear my voice, pay attention to heed the instructions, and perform them, do them, carry them out.
I think in the captivity, I think Daniel had the first step of that very heartfelt repentance that he cried out to him, and it touched Yahuwah's heart. And so I think that would be the first place to kind of consider his words and what he mourned for and what he had lost and the captivity that they're facing and looking ahead and then looking to the restorations you're speaking of and doing his stuff.
So if Daniel had to do something to indicate to Yahuwah that he, as representative of his people group, had started to make this change, how do we do that? Well, it goes on to say here, I will surely take pity on him, Nam Yahweh. That's where Yahweh signs it with his signet ring, which means we can count on it. This will happen. And then he says this, make road markers for yourself. Set up landmarks for yourself. Set the thoughts of your heart upon the road, the route that you are walking. Return, O maiden of Israel. Now he's referring to his people as a maiden. Return to these cities of yours. The word for city there is the same word that means to be vigilant. There's a couple different things. You can see more if you look into the Hebrew. But he's basically saying, okay, if you guys want to come back, this is what you need to do. You guys, Encourage each other, yourselves. Set up road markers like highway signs saying, like stepping stones, this is the path to take. So he is putting the burden, the responsibility, the effort on us to do something about our situation. He's sitting here saying, I'm waiting, I'm yearning. It's the prodigal son story, where the prodigal son, who was sitting there feeding the pigs and thinking, boy, I sure wish I could eat some of this food. Remember, the word pig in Hebrew means one who returns, one who turns back around. So he said, why don't I eat? I wish I could eat the food of one of these pigs. I wish I could eat the food of one who returns. I will return to my father's house. And on his way back to the father's house, as he's already made many miles and he got it within view, the father who had been watching for him rushes out to meet him. That's what this is talking about here. In Amos 5:24, he says, remove from before me the multitude of your songs and the music of your lutes. I won't hear it. Before that, he said, I hate and loathe your festive offerings. So people say, oh, we shouldn't be keeping the festivals because Yahweh doesn't care about that.
No, he's pointed out your festive offerings.
He's also thinking that, do we think he's happy when we're happy? We're singing and doing all these things. Oh, he must be smiling. He said, listen, that's not what I'm looking for. I'm not interested in your happiness. What he says is, rather, let justice be revealed like water and righteousness like a mighty stream. What does that mean? He's telling us the solution to the problem right here. When do we get the good stuff back? Let justice be revealed like water and righteousness like a mighty stream. How do you reveal righteousness like a mighty stream? Do a lot of it? What does that mean? I'm suggesting this is a riddle. Justice is the word mishpah. It means balanced scales. Let justice be revealed like water. What does that mean, like water? Here's a water fountain. It's just sitting there. There's a sprinkler. There's a garden hose. There's a lake. What do you mean, let it be revealed like water? When it's raining, water finds its own level. Justice is balanced scales. When we do justice fairly, properly, balanced scales, where there's no bribery, where you can't take the district attorney back into the room and threaten them with extortion to get you off the hook, and then the Attorney General comes out and says, I don't see any guilt here, everything looks good to me, well, there's no reason to prosecute this evildoer. That is not justice like water. But Yahweh says, when justice is like water, blind justice, balanced scales, then righteousness will flow like a river. What does that mean? Well, this word zadikah also means victory, deliverance, and salvation. And when something is unbalanced is when water flows. This is the picture that I get. Yahweh says to his people Israel, do justice, truth and kindness, emet and chesed, righteousness, zadikah. And when you put that on your side of the scales, then he, Yahuwah himself, who sees to it that the scales must be balanced, he will give us victory, deliverance, and salvation. But when we do corruptly, unbalanced scales, evil, wickedness, harm, oppression, theft, and murders, and lies, which is everything that Ephraim is all about if you read through the Old Testament, then we pile this up, then he has to allow our enemies to come and give us balanced scales of that same behavior. And he says, if you want to change what's been happening, then you start doing righteousness. You start doing emet and chesed. And then he will cause righteousness to flow into us in order to bring the scales back to balance. When he talks about things here, it's not just the narrative, but all these things are pictures. And they're all pictures of what he has established as you might call mechanics of the universe, but they're not just nuts and bolts and gears. There's also this fluid. There's this thing about fluid dynamics, about the way things work and the way things flow. And as we study the covenant, what we see is we are part of a system, of a big design. I mentioned about dominoes that are lined up, and he says, when you guys do certain things, boom, he will set that domino, which knocks the next, the next, the next, the next. There's numerous stories here that he will restore his favor. He tells us to take hold. Zechariah 8:23. There's one more verse I want to mention. Isaiah 33:18. Oh, I'm at Mark here. He says, again, it's rather cryptic. He's talking about some other narrative, but he says these words. Where is one who counts? Where is one who weighs? Where is one who counts the towers? It also says, your heart will muse in dread. What is he talking about? To say your heart will muse in dread, another way to read that is your heart will expel terror. The one who counts, the word counts is sefer. How you sefer is connect the dots, put the things he says together. It's the word for book, it's the word for cipher, it's the word for reading. Where's one who will understand what these words mean? The word for weigh is the word shekel, which also means to put something on this side of the scale so it equals that side of the scale. Where is one who will see what he's talking about in direct application of balancing the scales of inequity? What does it mean that we have inherited the curse? What does it mean that he has promised us that we can gain the blessing back for generations to come? What does that mean? Where is one who will shekel? And then it says, where is one who counts the towers? The word towers is migdalim. The word gadol is where you get something that swells up, becomes great, that becomes a tower, something grand and magnificent and majestic. Where is one who will look to severing the migdalim, who will take the time to look at the most important, significant matters in this entire book, make sense of them, put them into the scales, and figure out how to get the balance back? If you look in this thing in Jeremiah 31, the previous sentence was what it says, Rachel was weeping for her children. Rabbi David Foreman, recommend him again. He had a wonderful teaching about that. She figured out why there was a problem between her and Leah. She did something about it, and Issachar was conceived by Leah, and the word Issachar says there is something that's been accomplished as a reward. And he said her voice is heard in the heavens, and he said there is certainly a reward for your accomplishment, that Yahweh will restore his people, is what it's referring to. What I'm saying is that if we know how to sefer, to connect these different things from Joel 2:18, which we talked about the other day, which we could get into, I don't know if we have time in this video, Deuteronomy 28, Leviticus 26, Deuteronomy 30, when all these things have come upon you, take it to your heart with all your heart and all your soul, put these matters together, look at it, and do something about it. If we sit here and say, is it time yet? Gee, I think the rapture bus is a little late. He has put the burden and responsibility on us to do emet, truth, and chesed, tender loving kindness, with one another as we stand for his name, as we sit on Shabbat, and we walk the path that he gave us, even though there are voices of the serpent, the Nachash, saying, did he really say that? You don't have to do that. If you do something other than what he said, you'll be as good as him. Didn't you know that there's a different priesthood you can be a member of? Whether it's Melchizedek, whether it's some kind of Christian this or that, or whether it's some other group that has some divine apparitions of avatars and spirits speaking to them, whatever that other voice is. If it's not his voice, it's not his voice. So the burden on us is to think and consider, weigh and measure and say, does this align with his voice? If it is his voice, we need to do it. And if somebody comes up and says, you don't have to do what he said, let me give you 5 excuses why you don't have to do what he said. For the sake of an excuse to not listen to his voice, Adam lost the garden, Israel lost the kingdom, and we've had 2,730 years of the curse of Leviticus 26 blended with Ezekiel chapter 4. And as you mentioned about Daniel, how he petitioned for his people at Shemini Atzeret of 2010 in the land of Israel. in the place of Shiloh. He says in another place, go back and look at Shiloh and see what I did to my people. I devastated them and yanked the Mishkan away because they profaned it. 4 of us stood there and petitioned Yahweh with the same manner of prayer that Daniel had done for the southern kingdom, we had done with the northern kingdom. One of the men there was Todd Bennett. He's got an incredible series of books he's written called the Walk in the Light series, which I heartily recommend to anyone. My point is, we are in the process of doing what he said to turn things around. And I expect to see evidence immediately. Though whether we can notice, it takes a while to turn things if something is moving with a certain momentum. But once the change has started, Yahweh says he will bring things suddenly so fast that people go, hey, where did that come from? I expect the change to be imminent and emphatic and outrageous, and it could be any day, at any occasion. But when it happens, kingdoms will fall. The statue of Daniel chapter 2, you could read, as we've said before, not just, here's history. The head was Babylon, the arms were Media Persia, the midsection is Greece, the legs are Rome, and who knows what this iron mixed with clay is. But the amalgamated conglomerate system is what we have going on now, which looks like America, Britain, the UN, the NWO. It looks like the mind thinking of the Babylonic confusion, the arms and military and economics of Media Persia, the Greek culture of sports and entertainment, the legs of Rome, politics and religion stomping the earth, and the democratic voice of potsherds of clay, Adamah, earth, mixed with that iron, but yet they don't hold together. It looks to me like that's what we've got going on in the world scene today, which means this could be the very occasion that Nebuchadnezzar was given the vision of. And we should take heart and act accordingly, because we, us, our generation, here and now, might be, could be, and I believe are, the very ones to work into what Yahweh said and make this happen, because it's not us taking the reins out of his hands, but he put the responsibility into our hands and said, now you hear, you take it to heart, and you do what I told you to do, and it will happen. Nam Yahuwah, stamped with his signet ring. It must, it will happen.
Hallelujah.